rights management and like intellectual property, how do you feel that virtual reality will be affected by that? Like, will piracy of people, like people's images, be a thing? Is that an issue?
It depends. To be able to, with current technology anyway, to be able to acquire someone's image, to be able to acquire someone's 3D scan, it's not something that, you know, they're going to be on the bus and you're like, snap, got it.
Yeah.
It's going to be something where they're going to know that they've been scanned into it, and so is their identities. But then you have the whole side of, great, you got someone's 3D model. How are you going to animate their facial expressions? How are you going to animate, you know, their voice? How are you going to do all of this stuff? And in the future, that'll be, you know, easy. But as far as identities go, it's a lot more hassle right now than it's probably worth, and you can still tell that it's a simulation versus the real world. I think that once you get to the point where you can't tell a 3D model from a real person, and you can completely control and manipulate voice and all that stuff, then we're getting into interesting territory, but I think it's a ways off.
So do you think that, like, if that kind of thing was reality, like, people would just get lost in it?
Yeah, I think that it depends on the content that you develop for it. I think that if you have something like, you know, targets, you can only play targets for so long. If you have an entire expanse, an entire world where you're able to, you know, for hours and hours and hours go and do whatever, that's the ideal situation that sci-fi writers have been writing about forever.
The holodeck.
Yeah, the holodeck,
Yeah.
Ready Player One, Snow Crash, the metaverse, all of that stuff. So Facebook buying Oculus in that regard is pretty like scary, because if you're going to think of one organization on the planet that would combine with the most powerful VR organization on the planet, you might imagine that they're going to create the metaverse. And getting lost in it, you know, you can get lost in anything. Whether it's a sport, whether it's a game, whether it's a book, TV show.
In ancient Greek mythology, they talked about the lotus eaters, who were people that would sit around eating lotus flowers and hallucinating a perfect life all day.
Yeah, it's been around forever. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And ultra realistic violence, like, that's probably coming in virtual reality. And there's never been any correlation established between fictional violence and real world violence. But who do you feel is responsible for determining what is and is not acceptable content?
I think that it's two parts. One, it's the part of the people that are delivering the content to be able to educate and let you know what is going to happen in this simulation and do a very good job at it. And then it's also the responsibility of the person who's experiencing it to do that due diligence work. If we make, for example, an extremely violent game and we say 21 and over only, there's going to be decapitation, there's going to be lots of blood, there's going to be nudity, you got to watch out, and they just go and jump in and play and then they get mad, we will say, we did our best effort to let you know, you didn't hold up your end of the bargain to like actually read the warning. So it's the way it should be. Everyone's making their best effort to communicate that and digest it and then make a decision.
Agreed. That's the way it should be.
Do you think that, like, even though somebody might be consenting, they might get, like, totally desensitized, or it might, like, increase, like, their violence, or do you think that that's...
There was talk amongst ourselves of the potential of creating... We want to treat PTSD, but this is also a way that we might induce it. We might give someone images and sound and interaction that's so realistic that you know, they start having nightmares about it, that they start having negative connotations with certain things. I mean, you can wake up from a bad dream, you know it's not real, and it affects you all day.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever play Fear by chance?
Barely.
Fear scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Like, video games can totally produce a visceral response, even if you're not actually there, because again, your mind kind of does make it real.
Right.
But you talked about treating PTSD. What else could it be used for medically? Like, I'm a veteran. I fought in Iraq, and I have some experience with that. But what else could it be used for medically? So Conquer Mobile, the company that's making their medical simulations on our platform, they need just basic tracking. They don't need haptics or anything like that. They just need to be able to track, you know, hands and head. And you're able to create simulations of, okay, boom, there's been a car accident, someone's coming in, you can tell that they're losing blood, and you don't know how damaged their insides are. Go. And you would have you know, tools around you, like you'd have an actual devices that are on stands that you can interact with and push buttons, that you can take cables and you can put into people, even if the cables aren't real, just the sense that your hand gets close enough and games like, got it, you're grabbing a cable, and then you put it close enough, it's like, got it, you've let go. You don't need finger tracking or anything like that. because this motion right here, if my intention is to grab this and put it here, the system's like, got it, I know what you're trying to do. I don't need to tell when your fingers are open and when they're letting go, how many fingers are holding it. We don't need that kind of precision. And so that opens up an entire world of interacting with props and interacting with NPCs.
Absolutely. In my experience with training, mostly it's learning the exact steps. Like when you understand why you're doing something, like you talked about first responder situation, like providing emergency first aid, they would have to be able to identify to restore the breathing, stop bleeding, like they would have to recognize which steps in a VR simulation would help them remember that, because
right.
It's muscle memory.
Right.
You know, you just do it as many times as possible.
Right.
I'm interested in kind of like talking a little bit more about what you guys were talking about, because it kind of sounds like you guys were talking about social accountability and like PTSD, like these games might cause PTSD, but like, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it your guys' responsibility or is it the user's responsibility? Like, whose responsibility?
So the question that I always have around this is, at what point does the user know that they're succumbing to it? And at any point, it's easy for them to just close their eyes. All they have to do, and people forget that. On the roller coaster, they're like, shut it off, shut it off. Or the zombies will be coming at you, like, shut it off, it's too real. And it's like, close your eyes. It's not real. And people completely forget about it. And so it's going to be difficult to educate people to be like, if you're really being traumatized, just close your eyes, it's not real, take the headphones off, take the thing off, you're fine. In the situations where they know in that moment I can't handle this, we will educate them on, like, you know, there can't be a panic button because you might accidentally bump it. We're not going to put a big red switch on the side of your head. Yeah, just close your eyes, take it off.
Just hit yourself in the head when you want it to stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not going to have like anything like that, but we want to be able to have communication between users and admins, so there'll always be someone monitoring what we call the grid. The grid is the huge play space, and I'll draw a picture for you. Actually, it's already up there. I'll talk about that. Well, let's talk about it right now. Who cares? So our ideal situation is to create a space about this big, which is 150 feet by 75 feet wide. It's like 13,000 square feet. Very expensive, but it would allow for multiple users. And this, for the sake of this example, let's say there's 8 people that can play potentially at the same time. We call this the grid because only in software, in reality, this is one big open room, but in software, we're going to separate it into 8 sections. And you just get this grid effect. And you have grid A, B, C, D, etc., all that stuff. So when you come into the VR arcade and you want to play a game or go through a medical simulation or walk through your house, as a single player, what you're essentially doing is renting one of these grid spaces for yourself. And so you're going in and you're going to be playing against zombies in 40 feet by 40 feet. And the level that you're going to be in is going to scale to the space that you have available. So for example, the zombie level that you're going to be in is going to be the inside of a shack. And it's going to be inside of a room, and maybe you can go outside, but you know, there's going to be very clear limitations in the game of like, there's no reason why you'd want to go past here. And if you get even close, like this will be like the actual level. If you get through here, you're going to be like, no, you're leaving. There's no reason to do that. And
out of bounds, 5 seconds to return.
And we have the ability to, like, since we're controlling what you see and hear, it's so unnatural to continue in spite of us. We could do anything. We could freeze your view. We can give you a third-person perspective of where you are, something that's so disorienting, and yet nothing that's going to make you fall over that you're like, I don't want to do that again. In fact, there's a whole video that we posted yesterday that goes over, it's 5.5 minutes, and we should watch it before you guys leave because it covers a ton of stuff. One of the things it covers is the fact that if there's a wall here in VR, everyone's like, well, how are you going to stop someone from just peeking through the wall and cheating? What we've done is we've made it so that when you walk up to the wall, the game stops you, and it's this weird feeling where like everything's fine, everything's tracking just right. Oh my God, I'm moving, but my eyes are telling me that I'm not.
Yeah, like I can feel myself stepping, but I'm not going anywhere.
And it's this invisible like, no.
Yeah.
And like you're like, I don't want to do that again.
Well, are you familiar with the uncanny valley, Freud's concept of the uncanny, the unheimlich? It would be that. You would have the sensation of moving without actually doing it, and your mind would reject it completely.
Yeah, yep. And that's what happens. And the next time you want to try to stick your head through a wall, you're like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So you could do that with this too. The only way that someone would break this is if they took the head mount off and decided to, use the real world and keep walking through. You're paying for an experience. Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. There's going to be people who try to do stuff like that, but that's why you have someone who moderates like a ref that goes across the whole thing. Back to my original point, you're going to have someone who's in constant communication over voice channels to each player, so instead of being like, hey, you over there, stop running, you can just dial in and be like, stop running, or stop doing whatever, or you're getting way too close, or are you okay, are you feeling sick, do you need help? Like, communication, that's what this person's going to be for.
I would imagine that you could make it apply to the context of the simulation pretty readily if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if you wanted to, yeah.
Yeah, but continue, sorry.
So when you go in and you have an experience, you would be having essentially this much space. So you might be shooting zombies, someone over here is walking through their house. For their house, obviously a house is going to be bigger than 40 feet by 40 feet. What we have now is like a node teleporter, so you're able to like just toggle, goes black, you teleport. And you get the sensation of teleporting, which you've never had in the real world. It's like, whoa, I'm somewhere different. And it's actually pretty natural. It feels great.
So cool.
But what you could do is you could have everything from something as simple as that to a very sophisticated 3D display where you push a button on the controller and you see an outline of the house. You see the blueprints. You're like, I want to go to bathroom. And you're in the bathroom. You can easily choose where you want to go. Anything like that. That's how you navigate an entire house in a space like this. Now, if two people were to join together, if you two wanted to come to the VR arcade and play zombies, you're no longer each playing in these spaces. Instead, your spaces have been merged, and now you're playing not in a shack, but in an alley. You're playing in 40 feet by 75 feet, or 80 feet, right here. And so now your spaces merge, and both of you can cross over and cross-populate and do all of that stuff. Same thing scales if 4 people are in. Now you have 80 feet by 80 feet, which is huge. And 4 of you are like in a city intersection now, and you're running, and you're jumping, and you're ducking.
You can see each other's avatars and interact with them.
Exactly. You can talk to them. You can throw props to each other if you want. So like if I'm out of ammo and you have a bag,
gun!
And you can throw it. It's tracked so accurately, and if my hands are tracked, I can just reach up and grab it and beat zombies that aren't really there.
Yeah.
So you can interact with each other in all sorts of ways, but on top of having the freedom to move, which is something you can't get in the home, having the freedom to move, you also have the gameplay design to be able to make it feel like this space is much bigger than it actually is. For instance, even if you had a space that was this big, 40 feet by 40 feet, and you wanted to cram 2 people into it, it would feel cramped, and it would feel like, oh man, it's a bummer. We only have this shack to stay in. Well, if, for example, you started out in this shack and both of you are fighting, and then suddenly like a Jeep just busts through the wall, and he's like, get in, and both of you just walk up to it, then you get into the Jeep, and the Jeep starts driving around the environment. You're both still standing right here, but you're on the back, like, shooting things, and it feels like you're going somewhere.
I imagine it's similar to how the holodeck in Star Trek worked, that the imagery moved around you, but you personally did not.
Right, yeah.
And what about, like, suspension harnesses, or, like, some sort of able to keep the person in one area? You know, do you think that that's an option?
So everything that you attach to someone makes the experience, the chance of making it less intuitive or introducing a learning curve skyrockets. So what people are trying to do to get around that right now is an omnidirectional treadmill, where it's this apparatus that you put in your living room. It's like this tall, and you step into it, and it's this ring, and you wear special shoes, and it's this dish, and the idea is that you can walk and run, and it has such small friction that you can do it forever. Very, very cumbersome. The giant metal ring around you that's suspending you and telling which way you're facing isn't represented in the game. You can't do this. You can only do this or this and rotate. Yeah. And if you like have a gun and you go down, you're going to jam your hand on it. And that's usually not a problem because, again, at home, it's very difficult to track a prop in 3D, so normally it's just attached to your head. So what people do is they'll have a gun and they'll pretend they're holding it, but all it really does is send trigger pulls. That's it. And it's like every other game, the gun is attached to their head. So they aim and look with their head. And they can be doing this, and the gun is still right here because it's not true VR. Yeah. And in that case, you're not going to jam your hand on anything. But once you start getting to like what we're doing, this giant ring around you
does not work.
Right.
Because I thought it was incredible how I could see the crate in front of me and the barrel, and I went to reach it, but it wasn't there. If I had gone to move something and felt something that wasn't there or was there, it would have completely destroyed the realism of it.
Right.
What other obstacles do you face making more realistic VR?
It depends on which category, because right now realistic is, from what we have and what we're working on, you can create an experience that is unforgettable, that people's brains will fill in the gaps of things that aren't there, and they'll be like, that was awesome, that was great. Awesome. Right. And then if you wanted to really elevate it, you'd start talking about haptics. You'd start talking about the ability to make people feel things with their fingertips, be able to like grip things and have
Tactile feedback.
Tactile feedback. We have a couple ideas that we're working on. One has to do with a joint. I can't tell you how it works, but it's a brace that goes on your elbow that is able to adjust how much viscosity you have. So it can lock up completely, which means your elbow is completely locked, or it can have any variation in between. So when you go into the game and you lift something, it'll actually choose its viscosity, and you have to fight against it to lift it or push it, or when you hit the table, it just locks it up.
Does it use a sleeve filled with air, pressure pants?
It's not air. It's kind of a similar concept, but it's not air.
Trauma pants. EMTs use those for. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's something along those lines.
Yeah, cool.
You're like, I'm gonna guess until you tell me.
No, it's just, I'm an engineer. Nerd.
Right.
I love science.
Right.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can start messing with stuff like that, and then the question is, what about your wrist? Because if you lock on my elbow, I can still do this, and I can break the illusion of not being able to go through a wall. And what about my shoulder? And what about my knees? And so you start getting down this rabbit hole of like, how much stuff do we need to design for this? And how much stuff are people willing to put on? So the whole V-Arcade was designed around the concept that you get in, you have a fun time, you get out. You get in, have a fun time, and get out.
That was incredibly quick and painless,
Yep.
and I was in the game and out like that.
Yeah.
But I look forward to being able to buy something like that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the goal, is in and out. And so when you start getting a bunch of different things on a bunch of different people, it's like, okay, spend 15 minutes to suit up, hang on, and if